Hey guys, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Plus. Today's topic is the attempt to figure out what the best rates of weight loss are for fat loss. And by best, in this case, we mean specifically for people just interested in losing fat to become leaner for their own aesthetic purposes and healthier for medical purposes. So there are kind of, you could say, three schools of thought on this. I don't know if they're schools of thought, but three positions. One is the slow and steady position, which says that you got to go super duper slow. You don't want to jostle anything, disrupt homeostasis too much, throw yourself off your game plan, bite off more than you can chew, and there's some good stuff to be said for that. The opposite end of the spectrum is the get over fast school of thought or approach, which is like cut into the diet, lose fast so that you can end the diet quicker, so you could see really good results fast and keep yourself motivated. And there's some good things, including what I just said, to go for that. And there's kind of more a middle of the road approach, which sandwiches itself between the two of there's such a thing as too fast, there's such a thing as too slow. Let's aim for that middle. Through the course of this video, I'm going to be echoing that middle approach, but I want to be very clear on something. People often pride themselves on saying some things like, well, you know, extremists are never correct and extremism is not ever the right view and, well, you know, the middle is usually best. That's not actually true. That's not always the case. There are lots of exceptions to that, enough of them that it's not really a good rule to go in the middle. For example, just a really quick political example, at the time of the founding of the United States, essentially a liberal republic, a constitutional republic, was non-existent up until that point. The U.S. experiment was completely radical, and one could have surmised at the time of the revolution in 1776 that, well, these are extremists and it's going to fail. It's a bad idea. It didn't fail. It produced or kind of led to the discovery of the most viable current form of government that there had ever been, ushering in a world revolution for freedom and civil rights and all of those other great things that we now take for granted as the beginnings of a political discussion. So as almost anytime you talk about a country that is not a constitutional republic and whose government is not run as a democracy, it's like, well, that sucks, but they have these other things going for them. It used to be a really, really extreme view. So people back in the day said, well, that's very extreme, could have prided themselves on their middle-of-the-road approach. Oh, well, better safe than sorry, but not too cautious, right in the middle, and they would have been very wrong. And there's lots of examples in all sorts of medical and biological fields as well that tend to refute that idea. So we're not taking the middle-of-the-road approach just because we're kind of playing it pretty aggressive, but still safe. This isn't like stock investing or something like that. The reason we're taking the middle of the road approach is because of the logical reasoning that there are too many downsides, some upsides on the too slow approach, too many downsides, though there are some upsides on the too fast approach. So let's take a look at those downsides and upsides and then find that the logical mechanisms steer us towards that middle of the road, not just this kind of a compunction to say, well, the middle is always best, because that's just not true. It doesn't have to be true. So first point of attack here is we're going to try to talk about what too fast is. So what rate of weight loss is too fast to lose fat at? Well, so in some kind of sense, there's no such thing as the faster the better, right? It's not like, oh my God, you lost 5 pounds of fat last week, you're going to be 5 pounds leaner. Most of these issues come along from a sustainability perspective. The number that we're most comfortable referencing is 1% of body weight lost per week in a week-to-week-to-week plan, on average. Now, that doesn't include body water, so if you lose more than 1% your first week, don't worry about it, that's fine. But week 3, week 4, week 5, if you're still losing faster than 1% a week, some of these downsides may hit you sooner than later, and you may find that your approach was too aggressive. Now, there is obviously, as with all human traits and behaviors, there's a normal distribution about this point. Some individuals can tolerate 1% just fine. Some can tolerate 1.5% per week just fine. It actually works better for their combination of physiology, psychology, and particular situation in which they're in. Some individuals can't even get close to 1%. We'll talk about some of those later in the slow approach, but the 1% is just an average. But knowing nothing else about yourself, if it's your first time dieting or second or third or something, if you want to diet faster than 1% per week, consider this first and then make up your decision, because for the average individual, it might be a bit too fast. Up to 1% and including is fine, but much above that, especially 1.25%, 1.5% or 2% of your body weight per week starts to run into some problems. So the question is, what problems? One problem immediately is most of us aren't dieting just to lose weight, we're dieting to lose fat, which means we're dieting to preserve muscle mass as well as lose fat. Can you lose a lot of weight faster than 1% a week? Yes. Can you keep most of your muscle? Probably not. The further above 1% per week you go, the more risky it becomes for muscle loss. So if you stay within or at that 1% figure, meaning if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 2 pounds of weight on average loss per week or less, then what you end up having is a lot of fat loss, but at minimum risk to muscle. You start pushing 1.2, 1.4, 1.6% per week, you start to eat away at muscle in most cases. Muscle loss is not a great idea. Not a great idea for health. It deteriorates your health, makes you weaker. And it also, if you're doing this, as many of you are, for visual impressiveness, you're going to end up looking skinny. You know, nobody really likes to hear that at the end of the diet, people think they look sick. Or it's like, oh, hey, are you like doing a Willem Dafoe lookalike contest or something? And you're like, ooh, it's actually Maria Shriver lookalike contest, but close. Same person, I think. So it's one of those situations where very few people, especially in our fitness industry, and most of you watching, we're not really dieting to be thin. We're dieting to be lean. Lean implies that when you buy a lean steak, it doesn't mean you don't get the steak. Okay, there's nothing there. That's the analogy for skinny. It means you get a good big steak, but it's not a lot of fat. So in order to spare muscle and have that lean look, which most people really like and most people are really going for, you want to make sure you take your time, less than 1% of weight loss per week. Second really big concern. If you lose weight fast enough, your energy levels for training are going to start to plummet, which again is going to affect your muscle mass. It's also going to affect your performance in sport. If you're a CrossFitter, if you're a weightlifter, if you're a powerlifter, if you're a bodybuilder, your ability to perform well at your chosen sport, to do what it takes in training to keep getting better or at least stay as good, is going to significantly deteriorate. If you're losing weight for a CrossFit competition because you think your gymnastics performance is going to improve if you lose fat, awesome. If you lose it so fast that you get so weak in training that you're not able to execute the volume load or even to be able to do the movements that are required, you're going to suck worse and worse at gymnastics, and then you're going to get skinny and you're going to realize, oh geez, I didn't get better at anything I wanted. So the energy levels for training are a big problem. There's another chasing the tail problem, where if your energy levels for training start to really drop because you're cutting calories too much, then at first you're going to be losing weight really fast. But because your energy levels for training and maybe even for cardio are down, your average expenditure of energy is going to go down in training. Sometimes you can adjust for this. Sometimes it's too much and you can't. When those energy expenditure levels go down, we run into a problem. You now have to cut even more food from your diet, which leads to even lower energy. And that whole cycle continues until you barely have energy to train, you're eating very, very little, and you're losing a whole lot of muscle mass, and forget about competing in your sport because you're now way, way below your normal competitive levels. Another situation or problem with this approach is not just your energy levels for your workouts, which you may, through a variety of motivational quotes and grit and drive and maybe the use of stimulants properly, can overcome. Another concern is your ability to perform daily tasks and be cognizant and cogent at work. As I am filming this video currently, I am 1 week out from a bodybuilding show, and by necessity to the exotic nature of that sport, I am well outside of the range of what normally would be done nutritionally and training-wise, and my cognition is severely impaired. I am absolutely not sharp whatsoever. Difficult for me to read and respond to emails. It's hard to type. It's hard to go up and down stairs. I'm not very good at life right now. And if you diet much faster than 1% per week, you may find yourself in that scenario even though you're not dieting for a bodybuilding show. There are other concerns other than dieting through life. And this is especially true if you're dedicated, if you're committed, and this is just another cutting phase for you and you're nowhere near quitting. You might be able to survive this and just kind of take it on the chin and say, okay, this is just a part of the process. That's what I'm doing because I'm a bodybuilder. I know it's a very temporary state, and it's okay for me to not be super productive for 2 weeks, just barely get by. I've done plenty of work before this. Hey, I'm even working right now, and it's working out okay. But especially to beginners who often rush into these things, who try to diet at faster than 1% per week, they may come to the very erroneous and very unfortunate conclusion that, oh, dieting, that's the thing that makes me not be able to think, trouble walking upstairs, hard workouts are impossible, and I suck at my job. Oh, and I suck with my family too, because I don't have enough energy to do anything for them. My kids want to go to the park or the zoo, and I can't take them, or I don't want to take them, or I'm really crappy when I do because I have no energy. Dieting, yeah, that's not for me. I can't diet. Well, that's a terrible conclusion, because at a slower rate of weight loss, dieting is super sustainable and not really a big deal, and it still yields results. It just takes a little longer, and that's okay. So if you rush people in, or you let them rush themselves in oftentimes into really, really fast weight loss, they come out with a conclusion after usually failing the diet after several weeks or months and rebounding, which we'll talk about in a bit. They usually come out with a conclusion, oh, dieting, when that's just not sustainable, it's crazy. But the only thing that was sustainable about it much of the time was that they try to do it too quickly, right? And of course, then it becomes an untenable situation. So remember that the energy loss isn't just a problem in workouts. That energy loss is a problem through daily life, which is usually much more important even than your fitness goals. So there's a limit there. So making sure you don't go too fast can make sure daily life is good, and that can really lead to sustainability and an enjoyment of the fitness process, which really potentiates you doing it for a long time. Another concern, if you diet too harshly, the speed and force with which your body reduces your own subconscious physical activity and movement patterns, wakefulness, and metabolism is much greater. You basically, to use a very colloquial term, go into starvation mode, which is a real thing. If you starve animals, humans are included in that group, long enough and specifically hard enough, then they will start to display very low levels of daily activity. Why? It is an ancestral genetic mechanism that is programmed possibly through, I'm not sure, hundreds of millions of years of evolution, reinforced all of those hundreds of millions of years, that when there's not a lot of energy in the external environment, not a lot of food, being very active is a very poor use of resources. So the idea is your food-seeking radar becomes really precise, your physical activity becomes really low, you basically sit by a tree for a while, and when food happens to pop up, only then do you have a fight or flight response to go catch it, to go solve the problem. But if food is not abundant, your body and mind are designed to go into a regressive conservation mode. So your NEAT, right, which is an acronym that essentially translates into unconscious energy production activities, how much you fidget and all this stuff, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the complicated way, how much you're fidgety, how much you talk to your friends, how much you pick up the phone. In this last little bit dieting for this competition, I've had situations where I wanted to say a cool joke to my friends in response to something they said sitting right in front of me, and I abstained. I didn't say the joke because I didn't feel like it, because I didn't feel like moving my mouth, because talking was hard. You diet hard enough, you diet fast enough, you will hit that wall sooner than later, and you will hit it harder. As soon as you hit that wall, or as soon as those kinds of processes begin to roll, your resting metabolic rate and your total metabolic rate start to go down. How much physical activity you do, unplanned, not just an exercise. Even if you're hitting the same amount of cardio a day, you might not walk across the street to the drugstore like you planned. You might not go dancing with your husband like you planned. All of that starts to decline your metabolism. Your total energy expenditure starts to go down. And then what do we get from that? Well, we have to cut our calories even lower to keep up those weight loss rates. So it makes the diet incredibly starvation prone. It makes the hunger pangs crazy because you have to go that much deeper to make those cuts. So in a sense, your body, when you're dieting too fast, much faster than 1% a week, will make you diet slower. But you don't want it to make you diet slower because that comes with a lot of other harsh consequences, particularly mood effects and hunger pangs. When you diet really fast, your mood will become sour, low energy, recalcitrant. You won't want to be shifted from your daily activities for anything. Okay. For example, you're at your office. Somebody brings in something, a form for you to sign that you haven't seen before. Normally, if you're dieting within realm, or you're dieting, not dieting at all, or you're dieting responsibly and not too fast, you go, oh, cool, I'll just take care of this right now. If you're dieting at faster than 1%, by much in most situations, somebody brings in the form and it's this gigantic inconvenience. Your mind has to shift its perception altogether. It has to basically realign itself completely, and all of a sudden you're like, what the form? What the hell is this? And you can get aggravated. Of course, it's not very entertaining aggravation because you're too low energy to explode on anyone. So it just feels like that all the time. Every inconvenience is multiplied manifold. If you have a family, especially if you have children, significant others, you already understand before I even said this that this sort of situation is not sustainable in the least. And if you plan on doing this more than a couple of times to get to your goal body weight or body fat, you're going to be inconveniencing yourself greatly and inconveniencing family, friends, and coworkers exceptionally. Good idea to not go there. Hunger pains, another really big concern. If you diet relatively slowly, you can get away with minimal hunger on a diet, especially with some really good adjustments. And we've written a lot about that at various Renaissance writings and videos and things like that. However, if you diet very, very, very fast, faster than 1% per week, your chance of getting rebound hunger pangs are nasty. They go up really fast. Food starts to look sublime in nature. Some of you may have experienced this before, but if you diet way too rapidly, you'll be watching a movie. I remember my situation particularly. Again, I was dieting for a bodybuilding show, so it's a little bit of an exception, but very identical kind of process, just for a different reason. And I was in theaters watching The Hobbit movie when it came out. And I remember that in one of these situations, the various, what were they called? Well, I guess they're hobbits, right? No, the dwarves showed up to Bilbo's house, and they started to make dinner. And they were consuming cheeses and sausages and breads. And I'm sure there was some dialogue in there that was important, relevant to the major plot of the movie. But the only thing that interested me was the food. That's all I could think about. That's all I thought about after the movie was over. That is the only... When I think now about what The Hobbit was about, that's the one scene that stands out forever in my mind because it was so permanently woven in when I saw it in damn near starvation mode. That kind of pervasive psychological hunger, not just physiological anymore, that desire to eat tasty foods till the ceiling blows off, sets you up for a nasty rebound. Even if you don't get a nasty rebound, if you follow good maintenance phases, it makes you miserable while you're doing it. And it can leave you with lasting effects that are not pleasant. Borderline disordered eating behaviors. Not formal eating disorders, but nothing you want rattling around in your head. It's a bad deal. And most people find that this kind of radical hunger is unsustainable. And most of the rest, if they can sustain it during the diet, are so overwhelmed by these situations when they're off the diet that they regain either all or too much of the weight back. All that struggling. And for what? Just to regain the weight. So those are some really good reasons, really big, really powerful reasons that 1% or faster on average dieting speed is not a good idea per week. Now, mind you, just to reiterate, we're not saying just to be conservative. Better safe than sorry. Right? We're not saying that. If, in fact, these issues were not a big deal for fast weight loss rates, we would absolutely recommend them. Why diet longer than you have to? But they are big. And almost, if not all, of the consultants and coaches at Renaissance, most people in our community have personally experienced these. When you personally experience them, you know not to mess with them anymore. Any more than you have to. So if we don't have to diet that fast, maybe we could obviate a lot of these problems by dieting a bit slower. So that's the sort of refutation for that way too fast. One common, really quick before we move on to the downsides of slow weight loss, excessively slow weight loss. One of the common arguments made is, okay, I've got a client that, or myself, I'm just starting out on my weight loss journey. I'm very overweight. I can lose a lot of weight really fast. Isn't it a good idea for me to lose weight fast? And there's something there to say that, it's very motivating to see the scale drop fast, etc. And people say, look, muscle loss risk is really low if people are very overweight and losing weight and just started exercise for the first time. And that's absolutely very true. So why not push them faster? Well, I bring that argument back to you. And I'm going to be as ginger and politically correct about this as I can. But as many of you know about me, my limits for political correctness are rather slim. Here's the deal. What kind of people can you push really fast? What kind of people can you push a lot? If you have a trained martial artist who's suffered, who's been kicked, who's been punched, and you push them hard in the gym, getting kicked, getting punched, you know they can take it. They've proven it. And they can take the kind of beating that almost nobody can, and they'll bounce back, and you don't have to worry about them as much. Now, everyone has a breaking point, but theirs is high, and they've proven that. On the other hand, if you have an individual who's just very not prone to violence, gets a pinprick and starts crying, is that the kind of individual that you want to punch and kick in the face a lot and say, hey, it's just a part of training. Next set, let's go? Of course not. Their chances of quitting are going to be super high. Just the same way, individuals that tend to be very overweight, and this is not absolutely meant as an insult, it's meant as a pure statement of fact. On average, the individuals that find themselves very overweight, because as evidenced by their being very overweight, they're probably the kinds of individuals that need to be more careful about avoiding the pitfalls of dieting. They're the kinds of individuals that probably have more cravings on average than everybody else, that probably have more challenges in their life or in their own personal psychology of adhering to a plan, of consuming healthy foods, of restricting their calories. If you're 200 pounds overweight, you're not the number one candidate for being the kind of individual at that time. Maybe later you will. But at that time, we're not guessing you can be pushed the furthest. We're guessing you probably can't be pushed the furthest. But because physiologically your body will release fat very easily when you're very highly overfat and we don't have to worry about muscle, we don't have to go easy on you. So where does that leave us? It leaves us right back into that middle we're talking about. Yes, physiologically, individuals that are very overfat and just start a program of training and diet can go faster. But psychologically, they probably shouldn't. So that averages us back to right around that middle value. And we'll talk about what that middle value is when we talk next about what the bottom end is of too slow. So you guys see where I'm going with that? Can very overfat people go faster? Yes. Should they try as a matter of course? No. If they do a successful diet and they lose at around 1% and they just rock it out and they go, that was super easy, we could say try faster next time after maintenance phase. But how about this? Just go the same speed. 1% is really fast. For someone who weighs 300 pounds, that's about 3 pounds of body fat per week. You stretch that out for 3 months, we're talking about mega amounts of weight. You do 3 or 4 of those cycles, you're normal weight now. So if something that is supposed to be challenging, nay, impossible for most people to do, rapid fat loss at 1%, and you have a client or you yourself have pulled it off with basically no harm, and the thing you think is, I can do that faster. Don't. Take your maintenance phase and have another painless fat loss phase. If there was a way to lose fat without any of the downsides, without any of the low energy, without any of the hunger, without any of the anything that we're talking about here, that would be amazing. And you found it. So why not stick to that? Right? It's like saying, I went on a hike and I didn't ever get foot pain, or I didn't get hungry, and I didn't prick my hand on anything. And that was a really fun hike, and I got through 10 miles. Someone says, what are you going to do tomorrow? You're going to, because you're at this resort, and it's a hiking resort. They say, I'm going to go for 15 miles because I want some pain. Why? Is that really going to make your hike better? No, I feel like I'll get more value that way out of the resort or something. That doesn't make any sense. You can always come back, right? So if you have successfully run a fat loss diet and it's already at the top limit and you say, I can go faster, don't go faster is my best recommendation and ours at Renaissance. It's take a maintenance phase. For sure know that you have no lasting impact of that negatives of the diet, and then take another easy route to another 30 pounds of weight loss. It's amazing. So then you used to weigh 300 pounds. Now, hypothetically, you weigh 260 pounds, and someone's like, man, that must have been really challenging. And you go, you know what? It wasn't challenging at all. What does that mean? Does that mean you didn't suffer or grind or grit enough to earn it? No, that crap's for children. There's no earning it in fitness. There's doing it and getting it done. That's all that matters. And secondly, you have a huge advantage if you are in that group. You're now at 260 pounds and you feel like you haven't even warmed up yet. Guess what? You got like 60 pounds to go over the next several phases of the cycle. You'll find that as you get closer to 200 pounds, you will have to flex your muscle a little bit. You will have to grind a little bit, even below 1%. So the beauty of that is, if you're very highly overfat and you think you can go faster, humor all of us and don't. And then you'll save that much more for the later phases when you'll need it. You'll have that much less diet fatigue. I can't emphasize that point enough. Now, to switch gears, what if we take the extreme view and say, well, let's do that for everyone. Let's make dieting so easy that you barely notice it. Aha. Now we're talking about very slow rates of weight loss, and let's talk about the downsides there. We quantify at Renaissance very slow as anything much slower than 0.5% per week. Now, we're going to talk about a group of people in a sec that can lose slower than that, and there are special exceptions. But for most people interested in fat loss and weight loss for health and fitness and performance, anything much slower than 0.5% per week has some benefits. All of the ones that are the opposite of the cost. It won't lead to muscle mass if you go slower than 0.5% a week. Your energy levels will be great. You don't get any NEAT reductions in any unconscious effort reductions. You don't get any negative mood effects. You don't get any hunger pangs, rebounds. So we're saying, oh my God, this is awesome. It is awesome in those respects, but it has some other downsides too, which push the needle back into the middle ground. So what are those downsides? First of all, there's a tracking problem. If you lose 0.5% of your body weight or less, that is basically like saying if you weigh 200 pounds, you're losing a pound a week. If you're a bodybuilder, a fitness pro, or a CrossFitter who's got a lot of experience and you're used to your body, you're used to listening to your body, you know what kind of carbohydrate foods and diets and stress have an effect on your weight, well, 1 pound a week is very tenable to lose, and you can actually keep track of that because of the regularity of the rest of your life. For most individuals, especially that are new or relatively new to the dieting process, especially let's say if you weigh closer to 150 pounds, now we're talking about fractions of a pound lost per week. You eat a little bit of salt, or it's a little bit more humid outside, or you drink a little bit less water for some of the weigh-ins, and all of a sudden it looks like you're making no progress at all. We'll talk about how that's demotivating in just a second, but what about tracking? What about adjustments? Your guess as to how many calories you need to take in, how many calories you need to burn could be wildly wrong. You wouldn't know for weeks, if not months, because you're moving so slow. So if you're plan to lose 1/4 of a pound of tissue per week, how do you know you're on the right track? You could be gaining for 3 weeks, but due to body water, it looks like you're losing. So then you pissed away 3 weeks. You weren't really losing, you were gaining. You were going the other direction. You had no idea. So there's a tracking problem there. There's not a tracking problem in the middle of the road. There's definitely not a tracking problem at 1% plus, but we have those other problems, right? So if you lose weight fairly rapidly, you can tell if the plan is working, and you can tell how well it's working because weight drops off pretty quick. If you lose weight way too slow, or the goal is to lose weight way too slow, you can be in a situation where you're not really quite sure if you're losing weight. People say, how's that fat loss phase going? You're like, it's going. How much weight have you lost? Like, oh, nothing on the scale yet, but I feel great. No one's ever really satisfied with that answer, fundamentally. So there's the tracking problem. There's another problem, just hinted to it earlier, of demotivation. It can be incredibly demotivating to be doing the dieting, to be doing the cardio, to be restricting. Fundamentally, and we've published articles on this, Dr. Melissa Davis of RP has made a very good article of this, very good blog post about that cutting is not a lifestyle, healthy living is a lifestyle, but a dedicated fat loss phase has a distinct beginning and a distinct end, and it is characterized by restriction. Even the most liberal cutting plans are fundamentally restricted, and that psychology weighs on you. While it's weighing on you, you're not seeing any results on a scale. That can be very demotivating. You're cooking all these meals, you're making all these Tupperware containers, you're counting all these macros, all the stuff, and for what? Some weeks you lose weight, some weeks you don't. And the weeks you don't, my God, that can really bear down on you. And especially if we talk about that group of people that starts out with no weight loss yet and they're very overfat and they've done a lot of things that failed. Imagine exposing that group to, well, we're just going to play it by ear and go super easy. Well, after 3 or 4 weeks of seeing almost no results, they're going to get very upset. They're going to get very recalcitrant, and they're probably just going to quit. And a lot of people do. So there's such a thing as too slow from a motivational standpoint. It's good to have a weight loss fast enough to where you're like, boom, this is happening. The weight's going down. The waist is tightening up. Your belt notches every couple of weeks are getting a little looser. You got to move up a belt notch every now and again. Measurable results can be very motivating. So there is such a thing as too slow for motivation on self. And what I just hinted to lastly is, remember, there is this illusion of a fat loss lifestyle. Fat loss is not a lifestyle. Fat loss is a tool, a phase, a distinct unit of time that occurs, and then it is over, and then you get back to your healthy eating lifestyle at maintenance. By definition, losing fat is an imbalance of the homeostatic processes of your body. Your body's fundamentally out of balance. That is a psychological burden. It is a clock that begins to tick as soon as you start dieting. If you diet excessively slowly, meal prep, restriction, the idea that you can't just go to a restaurant and eat whatever you want for one meal because you know it's going to count some way or somehow. You know that your body's really good at bringing you back to your homeostatic normal base rate, but that if you have a meal every now and again of just eating whatever you want, your body's just going to bring you back up to that and you won't be able to lose. That realization that you're in a diet, that is psychologically taxing. And if you go too slow, you just end up dieting for a really long time for a minimum result. I'll put it to you this way. Is it safe to go on a road trip and travel only down side streets and off the freeway and go 30 miles an hour? Absolutely. Much safer than the freeway, I'll add. But how long can you road trip for until you go insane and quit and turn back and turn around? You can't. So the car analogy is really good here. There are three fundamental ways to do a road trip. One, which we already talked about, the excessively fast, is going 120 miles an hour down the freeway. Well, it's just plain dangerous and unsustainable. The other is to use only side streets and go 30 miles an hour, painfully slow, right? And the other is maybe 60, 70 on the freeway within the speed limit, but at the top end, gets you where you're going pretty safely, but it also gets you there on time. You don't have a tendency to just not want to have a road trip. So we want diets to be at a pretty decent clip, sustainable, but decent, so that they begin, they go for some length of time, several months, they end, there's something to show for, there's no rebound, but you got somewhere really good instead of just floated around. Lastly, just to make sure we're clear, some individuals, some groups of people, they don't fall under this constraint. So for them, it's actually okay to go slower than 0.5% per week. Advanced athletes to whom training, intensity, and volume are incredibly important. If you're a CrossFitter and you have to be at competition weight in 4 months, and your competition weight is only about 5 pounds below what it is now in tissue, you have to train your butt off to be in shape for that competition. You can't have a diet weighing you down. You can't have a fast weight loss rate being so hypocaloric that it doesn't support recovery and doesn't support maximum performance. You may choose to go very slowly, 0.5 pound a week or something like that, even less. But you're also very used to your body. You can tighten just a couple of knobs and get that weight loss going, and you know you're on track, and you can check in every month. And if the last month didn't get you down about 1 pound or 2, you can go again a little harder this next month. But you can't go super fast because training is so important. Other athletes that need to do this are bodybuilders, gymnasts, wrestlers, individuals to whom performing at the very time of their training is super important. If you're losing weight just to lose weight, if you're losing fat just to lose fat, some relatively minimum amount of weight training and cardio is going to be all that you need to do. You can not perform at work at your 100% best for a couple of weeks and be okay. And then you can lose weight really fast because you have a big margin. But for athletes that really need to perform at a super high level, they can go slower, especially if they're used to your bodies and especially if the tracking situation is not a problem. For those individuals, yes, 0.5% and less is totally fine. But for most of us, between 0.5% and 1% weight loss per week, RP we recommend for about 8 to 12 weeks, and then with about 8 to 12 weeks of maintenance in between those fat loss phases if you want to keep losing fat, that's probably the best combination of fast enough to keep you motivated at a good clip, measurable, slow enough to avoid the extremes of hunger, the extremes of energy reduction, moodiness, and rebound. Give that some thought. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time.